Okay, so welcome to the first Business Lab Television Business Bite. Today we're going to be talking about CLOs and CDOs. Essentially, today's Business Bite just takes a brief look at what a CLO and a CDO is and tries to explain very simply how they operate and a little bit into how they dealt with the US housing market and subsequently how they impacted US financial markets. This isn't meant to be a complete coverage of CLOs, CDOs. You have to remember this is an entire industry in itself, and this is, effectively some of these concepts are the brainchilds of some very bright individuals. So there are a number of ways in which these can be structured, but today is just for basic beginners to have an idea of what a CLO and a CDO is. So essentially, a CLO or a CDO is just a collection of cash flows. So, for example, and this is where the housing market serves well, if mum and pops all over the US or Europe are each paying their mortgages each month to the same kitty, as it were, this would be considered a CLO or a CDO. So effectively, what you have is a collateralized loan obligation. This CLO holds all the mortgages to all these houses. So it's entitled to two things. One, it's entitled to the cash flows, and two, indirectly, or in the case of prime mortgages, directly, it has the houses as security. But one of the issues that you face in this scenario is that you have a number of different mortgages and potentially a number of different people who wrote these mortgages. So the real question is, how do you sell this to other investors? Because there's only going to be a certain amount of appetite for housing loans globally, but there's always credit available. How do you channel credit into housing loans without them necessarily having the stigma or association of housing loans? So we've got our collection of housing loans. Mind you, as I said, this could be any particular set of cash flows. So any set of cash flows. It could be a collateralized loan obligation of businesses, of bingo associations, of football clubs that generate money. It could be anything, but for this purpose we're going to talk about housing loans because that is obviously the centre of a lot of discussion. So, as we said, they have their cash flows and they have their loan collateral. But like I said, they want to sell this to investors who may not necessarily be looking for housing loans, but who do want a form of credit to invest in. So if we say that this fund generates $100 a year and has a value of $100 backing it, but we say that it's only really a double B plus credit. That is, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, one of the rating agencies, has said, look, the quality of this cash flow and the quality of the value of these assets is only really worth a double B. That is to say, these housing loans, we think they're okay, but they're not great, so they're only worth a double B. how do we turn this double B housing loan credit into something that is an attractive double A minus or better, so that we can call it investment grade and then sell it to a whole lot of pension funds and other financial institutions who cannot invest in something that is this low quality but can invest in something of this quality? Well, this is where a lot of the financial intermediaries came in and came to the fore pre-crisis, and only got found out during and post-crisis. So a financial intermediary, say for example a bank or a mortgage institution, a bank or a mortgage institution will have the majority of these loans and they'll want to on-sell them. So as the intermediary, what they might say in order to achieve investment grade credit is, to a certain extent, we will guarantee this. So if we consider the value of the fund and the cash flow of the fund as being a double B credit, the bank may say, well, of the value we will guarantee 30 cents in the dollar, and of the cash flows we will guarantee 40 cents in the dollar. Right? So this risk is absorbed by the bank or the mortgage institution. So although whoever purchases this asset has $100, 100 cents in the dollar backing their fund, and 100 cents of cash flow backing what they've bought, being generated by what they bought, they actually only have at risk 70 cents in value and 60 cents in cash flow. That is to say, for example, way back all the way over here, if the mums and pops over here who are paying their dollars suddenly have a problem, can no longer pay, so the money that filters through becomes less as a result. So they stop paying their mortgages, the cash flow stops, they perhaps have to repossess the homes turn out to be the worst, worth less than what they thought they were, and with the homes worth less than what they thought they were, the value of the fund is less. The bank has guaranteed to whoever they've on-sold this CLO to that, hey, listen, if we're 30% off on the value of the homes, we've got this. If we're okay on the value of the homes, or even if we're inside our 30% margin, but just the cash flow from the homes is less, we've got 40 cents in the dollar covered for you guys. So rest assured, your money at risk is only this, even though you're actually getting $100 and $100 as per what we told you. So we can now sell this debt onto you at AA minus, because you're getting this, but you only have less than that actually at risk. What we'll look at next, quickly, is how does this all become unravelled? We've got our CLO. It's promised us that $30 out of the 100 for the value and the cash flow is guaranteed, and we have only got 70 at risk on either. So we've bought what we think is a AA minus credit. Fantastic. Now, step back for a second and have a think about what happens if the majority of the loans that were written to underlie this actually end up falling outside this $30 range, there are actually two things that happen in this scenario. First, the institution who guarantees this takes a massive hit. So for example, in $100 billion of on-sold value, they've just guaranteed $30 billion in value. They've just guaranteed $30 billion in cash flow. Now, if it turns out that all the housing loans that were written were much like the ninja loans, the no income, no job asset loans written in parts of the country in the US, where the serviceability of the interest was always in question, and in fact as a result of the housing bubble the value of the house was in question. Let's say for example it turns out that 40% of the loans, not only the loans default, that is to say the cash flows dry up, the interest stops being paid, and when they go to sell the house they suddenly have so many houses in the market they realise that 40% of the value of the underlying assets is actually bogus. So you've instantly had a loss to the bank of not 60 billion but 30 billion plus 30 billion times the number of years left to run on this fund. Well, often this may not be 30 years if the term of the mortgage was 30 years. This may only be 5 years, but still a heck of a lot of money, I'm sure you will agree. And we saw that with massive write-downs across the board on a number of CLOs, CDOs and related similar products. Remember, it doesn't just have to be housing. This could be any financial instrument. It could be any cash flow generator. The second thing that happens, and this is what really caused the meltdown, is that if it turns out that this is no longer AA rated credit, if it actually turns out that, well, with 40% reduction, we've taken this hit, that is, the pension fund or the government fund, if it turns out that they themselves have also lost money or have money at risk inside their chunk of what they were told was all they had at risk, then there's also the possibility, and a very real possibility that occurred, that this is no longer AA, that perhaps it's only an A- or a BBB+. Now the real problem happens when certain funds who invest in these CLOs cannot hold assets in this range. That is, their charter, their equivalent of their constitution says you cannot hold a investment with a grade less than AA-. Now there might be some flexibility, but in this situation where it drops down dramatically, they can no longer hold that asset. That is to say, under their charter, they must sell the asset. So they have to sell their CDO or their CLO interest. If you remember back to when we started this tutorial, part of the reason for packaging up these cash flows and repackaging and rebranding them as an investment grade option was to make the market broader. If you suddenly have everyone who cannot hold sub-investment grade debt selling, not only do you have everyone who cannot hold it selling, you have limited credit to buy it. And the resulting effect is what ultimately caused a large proportion of the US housing meltdown. You saw freezing of CLO and CDO assets as everyone tried to quickly sell out, and ultimately, if you remember where this actually stemmed from, these funds relate to homes. So you suddenly have the original mortgage originators and financial institutions who lent these mortgages trying to quickly claim all of the value back from their assets, which means a massive fire sale of housing properties. But ultimately, no matter how much you repackage something, if the original credit for the loan was bad, it will eventually translate into a situation that's very difficult to get out of. So thanks again for watching BLTV, and tune in for our next tutorial.